Um, all right. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Liu, and I'm a PhD student um, here at ASU. So essentially, I'll just be presenting on um, what I guess from experience, what a good iGEM project looks like, and especially I'll be looking at it. I mean, presenting it in the lens of an iGEM judge. So if you guys go to the Giant Jamboree, what criteria are the judges going to be looking at when they look at your wiki page as well as your presentation and everything in general? So let me just open up my share screen. So, where is it? Oh, but yeah, and then also on top of presenting, I'm just presenting like a quick 20 minutes, but then I think as you guys saw in the emails, Margaret said that we'll be also doing a FAQ session with a handful of people that have experience in iGEM. And so I'll introduce them afterwards. All right. So yeah, so what should an iGEM project look like, especially from a judge's perspective? Essentially, who the heck am I? My name is Aaron. I'm a third-year PhD student, or I guess candidate now, in the Varman Lab and the Nielsen Lab, so where we do metabolic engineering. I studied genetics at Purdue, and then I was a part of the Purdue iGEM team from 2013 to 2018, and then I've done research. But then also last year, one of the biggest, perspectives that I gained was being an iGEM judge from last year. So I guess, wait, Margaret, have you presented on what is iGEM or like done an intro?
Very briefly.
Okay, I'll go through this briefly too. So what is iGEM? It stands for International Genetically Engineered Machine. So essentially it's an independent nonprofit org that's pretty much just trying to enrich a synthetic biology community, as well as increase education and I guess public engagement through students, and not only students, but the entire foundation, right? So like all the members of iGEM, they're from 2005 and 2019, there's over 40,000 participants in the Giant Jamboree. There's been over 2,700 teams, and there's over 60 countries in the world that participate in this. And so essentially, I guess one of the biggest takeaways I've really loved and enjoyed is that all of the work we do is really cool, and it just inspires not only like ourselves but other people as well. So the iGEM competition, usually there's about 6,000 students and instructors that take part of it every year. So 70% is undergrad, which is all of you guys, and then about 30% are overgrad, which compose, I guess, of all the teams. So yeah, so not only are there like undergraduate teams, but also graduate level teams. So essentially, like, what is iGEM is that, you guys, the projects that you guys work on serve as proof of concepts and prototypes. Essentially, like, your solutions don't need to be huge. So when you're making a project or thinking of a problem you want to tackle, don't aim too big. So we're not going to cure cancer, right? And we're not going to solve world hunger, but each time teams will take a step toward that, right? So we're working with, previously established things that other teams have worked on, or we're adding to the repository of parts that teams can use. So that way we can, at some point, quote unquote, cure cancer or solve world hunger. And so essentially iGEM projects have a lot of different tracks. So there's diagnostics, energy, environment. all the way to like software and manufacturing. I believe there's also hardware somewhere, which might fall in one of these. But yeah, there's a lot of tracks that you guys can choose from. And essentially, like what the cycle is for iGEM teams is that from the spring, you guys start fundraising and brainstorming ideas, etc. And then during the summer is when you guys do like the hard research and wet lab work. And then around the fall, you guys are wrapping up your experiments and then going to the iGEM Jamboree or virtual Jamboree and presenting your results. But in reality, not all teams just follow this one cycle. Teams also start around, I guess, between the fall and spring semester. And then the best is to start wet lab work as early as possible. So between the spring and the summer. So essentially, you guys aren't only doing like science, but you guys are learning how to make or how to impact society in the world. So you're not only working on the science, but communicating your data that you've gathered, learning how to work in teams, and then conflict resolution, advocating your work and trying to secure funding. So one of the biggest things that I've heard is that having an iGEM team in a club is essentially like being a startup, where you have to pitch your idea and get the money and really convince people that your idea is a good idea. You have to navigate challenges of project management. So your research that you're going to do isn't just straightforward. Where you build your plasmid and put it into a cell. You're going to make mistakes, or there's going to be things that you just can't really plan for. So you're really going to learn how to circumvent that, or how to be flexible and shift your direction if something does happen. You also learn public outreach. So engaging with the public, talking about your project, getting feedback from stakeholders and the public about your project, and really learning what do the public feel about genetic engineering and your project, and then also concerns, and then address safety and security implications. So we're not just gonna implement a solution and put it out in the world. How are you gonna keep your project from polluting rivers and stuff like that? What type of kill switch are you going to use in case your specimen leaves the bioreactor, etc. And then also understand ethics and social responsibility. So not only the science, but also the bioethics of your project. So if you're trying to make, I guess, a gene drive that kills mosquitoes, right? What are the ethical implications of that? And what types of social issues will that cause and arise from? And then also understanding public policy, regulation, and law. So really understanding the laws of the US or whatever country the teams are in, and potentially also talking to lawmakers and policymakers about your project and getting feedback from them, and what laws your project will affect it if it was ever implemented, right? And so I'm gonna actually skip this, but yeah, there's a lot of different projects. So you can tackle water pollution, protect vineyards, do projects in public health. Essentially, another cool thing is that a lot of startups arise from iGEM projects. And then just what iGEM is, it started in 2005 at MIT with only 13 teams. And then the year after it was only 32, but last year there's over 353 teams. So it's a really growing community. So essentially, like, what is a good project? An iGEM project is two sides. There's the engineering methods and measurements, so like the science of it, and then the human practices, in my opinion, and a lot of judges, yeah, would feel the same. So like, what are methods? Essentially, you want to show that you want to communicate that using a engineering methodology of design, build, test, where you review your problem and really try to understand it, design a solution based upon that, build it by synthesizing your DNA, cloning, and then testing it by implementing it into your strain and then recording your results. And then also learning from what your results are and potentially iterating on that. Not a lot of teams get into iteration, let alone testing, but just considering, just like showing that you've considered it is pretty much good enough for a lot of judges. So like methods, you want to identify and demonstrate an understanding of the problem. You want to really gather your data, talk to stakeholders and get their feedback on the issues at hand. Select the right approach for your solution for the problem. So is it really the best way to solve that problem, or is there any other alternatives that you can also use? You want to also list your assumptions, approximations, and simplifications. So a lot of the times, like E. coli is a model organism. So if we're going to genetically engineer that, they might not be the best suited for like certain environments or conditions. So what are the limitations, and how can you potentially move forward after verifying it works in E. coli? And then establish quantifiable measures of success. So how do you know it's going to work? You can't just say, oh, my cells are going to glow green. You want to say, oh, a certain level of fluorescence will occur, meaning our system works. And then when you know it does work, what other methods can you use to verify that it's working? So the first approach you use, there might be some pitfalls or holes that not necessarily means your project is working. So you'll want to also apply other methods to show that it's going to work. And then you want to just like communicate how you went through the entire like story of this and really present it and make a like convincing argument or story to the judges that this is the solution that you made and this is the best, what you believe is the best for that problem. And then you want to also have quantifiable measurements. So you want to make sure your system is reproducible so that other teams and researchers can use it. It's functionally reliable. Is it compatible with other hosts, or is it flexible essentially, and can it be applied to other systems or conditions? You want to make sure that you have proper controls for your experiments. Essentially, you just want to clearly demonstrate that function sufficient to demonstrate function or precise quantitative measurements and specific statistics are required. You want to just show that the data you've collected is showing that you've had a successful project. So human practices. Essentially, you want to integrate your human practices throughout your project. So you want to clearly, this is from the handbook. Oh, I forgot to mention this. This QR code links to the 2019 handbook. So feel free to like use that if you want to follow along or get more information, because I'm really just outlining things that I thought was important. But there's a lot more like helpful information in it. But yeah, you want to carefully and creatively consider whether your projects are responsible and good for the world. So how do you do that is integrate in it, like asking yourself, do you integrate your human practices throughout your project? Is it a good inspiration to like other teams? Do you document it in a way that others can use your integrated human practices? Did you thoughtfully implement it and not just like haphazardly say, oh, we forgot to do this, so let's go talk to random people? And did you also explain the context rationale of why you did your human practices? Did you also like talk to stakeholders? And then are you really convincing like us that this, like all of your human practices really like helped your project? So going to requirements for medals, they're essentially bronze, silver, and gold. In order to get bronze, you just need to you need to have all of this. So you need to have deliverables. You have to have an attributions page on your wiki. Also, you have to project inspiration description, talking about the problem at hand and the solution that you want to implement. And then you also have to have characterization. So at some point, have some sort of data that shows that the system you've built works to some degree. For silver, you want to validate your part. And then you also want to have collaborations as well as show integrated human practices as well. For gold, you need to meet not only all of these, but two of one of these. So really have like a strong integrated human practices approach. Improve a previous part or project. So look at a part from previous iGEM teams and characterizing it and improving it. Having a good model. So a good computational model, and then or demonstrate that your work works really well. So how much time do I have? Okay, so yeah, if you follow this QR code, it's gonna lead to the 2019 Calgary project. So we can go through that wiki page to see what a good project looks like, essentially. Let me just share this.
Don't worry about time. Take as much time as you want.
Okay. Yeah, I just want enough time for the FAQ. But yeah, so can you guys see this desktop?
No, I think you have to reshare your screen for your browser.
Desktop one. Okay. All right, do you see this one?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay, so this is the Calgary team's wiki page. So one of the first things that we want to just like look for is, do they have all of these pages? So do they have deliverables? So like quantifiable results. So they do. Do they have an attributions page, which is pretty important? So if you just click on teams, they have an attributions page that lists like what the responsibilities of each member is, which is pretty important. So essentially what this is pretty much for is just to make sure that, it wasn't graduate students or like PIs doing all the work essentially. And the iGEM team was just piggybacking on it. They want to make sure that you guys are doing the work yourselves, or most of the work while getting help from everybody else. So project inspiration description, which was the main page, they do a pretty good job describing what the issue is. So they're saying that canola is one of the biggest, one of the leading crops in Canada. Give a bunch of like reasons why, but the problem is that green seeds cause millions of dollars of loss in the canola industry, and they want to change that. So they describe what the issue is. Chlorophyll degeneration pathway suspended and the seed remains green. Why is this an issue? They cause financial harm to farmers and oil producers. Specifically by when plants are exposed to frost drought. Okay, they turn green, or they don't turn green when they don't get enough nutrition. Or no, they turn green when they get a lot of nutrition. No nutrition, sorry. And then so characterizations page as well. It's pretty easy to navigate to that. So we go to parts and characterization. We can see, the system that they developed and characterization. So one of these is they improved the part. So if I click that, that didn't link to what they said it was. Oh no, this is the improved part. So yeah, this shows the part that they were trying to work with and their improvements. They show that they were able to, I believe they were able to increase the number of white colonies compared to the original part that they were working with. So that checks off, I guess, for gold that they filled that in. And then also for additional characterization, where'd it go? If I just click one on these parts, it links me to the iGEM registry, and then we can see all the data that they generated from that part itself. So like this here. And so they didn't only use like one type of experiment, but they also showed that they were able to, that their system was expressing the protein of interest by doing an SDS page, showing that they get the bands that they want. So now they meet all of bronze. So moving into silver, we saw that they validated, we can reasonably say that they validated their parts. So for collaborations, we can look for that. Where would that be? Oh, human-centered design collaborations. They helped make a regional conference in Alberta with other Argentines in Canada. They did public education. They created an intro to synthetic biology education package for schools. They did another meetup. And then they did a lot of, I guess, public engagement. And then, so moving on to, well, they do a pretty good job of human practices. So we'll move into gold. So one of the other criteria they met was integrated human practices. So going into their project, not only did they, do a lot of background information, but they also talked to a lot of stakeholders. So here we can see they talked to Ward Tama, which is the general manager of a canola producer commission, and they got feedback from him. They also talked to an agronomy specialist, a professor, a research scientist and program manager of oilseeds monitoring and research. They visited the Pleasant Valley oil mills. They talked to farmers, and they also talked to another project manager. But not only do they say they talked to them, but they also outline what did they learn from all of these people. They learned about the pipeline of how the seeds get to the market. And then they ideated how they would apply their solution to the system. Yeah, and so they also, to help design the solution, they also talked to other experts in the field. So I believe, yeah. another reason why this team, they didn't win. Actually, they didn't win the best undergraduate team, but they were the runner-up. I guess I'll talk about why they were only a runner-up. Was they had a part of their solution. One of the parts they worked on was an algorithm to calculate weather, and so they did a very good job of showing the model, etc. But I think in the long run, it kind of hurt their results. I mean, their outcome, because I mean, this is what meteorologists are for, right? They essentially use a machine learning algorithm to calculate, to like predict weather patterns, but they've only used, I believe they only used 2 weeks or 2 months worth of data. And that data would be able to be extrapolated to apply to weather throughout the year. So in my opinion, this kind of hurt them, because they didn't really make a good enough argument why this was important. And especially, I thought that their methodology was pretty weak on this part. But yeah, so other parts of the project that they did really well, though, is they did a really good model. They showed modeling of their system. They had 3D images of it. They show how they designed it. They had a 3D image of the component of it. And then they also discussed like the impact of their model and how they can help other teams and other researchers. I'll right-click to Chris. This one, so, they tested they did use some chlorophyll separation system in water, in oil emulsions. And if I recall correctly, they were able to show that they were able to decrease how green these emulsions were with their system. Another facet of their project was, where is it? But yeah, I don't entirely remember all of the parts that they worked on, but they had a lot of different parts that really did make like a good holistic like solution, while also integrating feedback from a lot of other stakeholders and experts within the field. But yeah, so this is pretty much like what a project looks like. And I believe correct me if I'm wrong, if one of the other members are people with experience, but I believe their presentation is probably online somewhere. So you guys can actually go look at their presentation, because I don't think this wiki does a really good job. I mean, it doesn't like really represent how well they did. It's already really good, but I think their presentation was even better. But yeah. So I guess we'll move on. Let me see if I can. Share. So yeah, so that's like essentially an outline of iGEM. Here I've brought some people together that have iGEM experience. There's Dr. Stefan Tickle, who is a visiting scientist in one of my labs and works for Sustainable Conversion Ventures. He was the previous graduate mentor for the ASU iGEM under Dr. Haynes. Griffin McCutcheon, who's a friend of mine, who's a PhD candidate here at ASU and is in the Alex Green's lab. And then he was a previous mentor for the NASA Ames team. Hana Kubo, who's also a PhD candidate from NU, graduate mentor for NU. Oh, and then also a judge from last year. Suraj Mohan is also a judge from last year. He's a master's student. And then Archana, who is also part of the Purdue team with me and was also, or is applying to be a judge for this year. So yeah, I'd like to open it, like the floor to any questions from to me or this wonderful iGEM panel.
So, oh, I just forgot my question. Never mind, give
No
me
problem.
2 seconds.
No, you're good.
While you're thinking about your question, I see a question in the chat. Hi, by the way, this is Hannah. I see a question asking, are you raising money to go to the competition or for the research? So I actually wasn't the treasurer, but Aaron and Suraj both have experience, and Archana actually all have experience in running the finances of the iGEM team. So maybe one of you guys can speak to that question then.
I think most of the money that we raise goes towards travel and the like funding, not only travel, but also funding students to do research. So, you know, not a lot of students can stay over the summer unless they're being paid, right? Because of, you know, rents, etc., or tuition to do like summer classes. But most of the money was funding students to stay over the summer, as well as traveling to Boston. And then next year is potentially in Paris, or will be in Paris, or virtual, which even with that is probably even more expensive.
So, my question, now that I've gotten it all the way back, when it comes to workflows, is it generally better for people in iGEM to kind of have a sense of what everyone's doing all of the time, or are people better off each doing like their own particular aspect of the project and then coming together on regular intervals to get things all slotted together?
I think Stefan's here. I know he has. We were talking about this earlier. If you want to just say that, talk about that.
Sorry, me?
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about like divide and conquer.
Yeah, I think a lot of the successful teams, they have a pretty large amount of students. And so they usually divide and conquer based on what their strengths are. Some people are really good at graphic design, working the website. Some people do some modeling for protein things. Some people do wet work. Plus, people working in different labs have access to different resources. So doing lots of collaboration and working together to do what you're best at definitely will help.
Yeah. So one of the best ways, from my experience, is making committees. So like having a grant committee that applies to different undergraduate, like, or iGEM grants. Having a committee that looks at human practices, where they do research on like who the stakeholders are and who should they talk, and then also like coordinate like discussions between, you know, those experts and stakeholders with the team. And then even like in the science, having one person that like is really dedicated towards, you know, cloning, and another person that's really good at, or that runs a certain experiment as well. That's like honestly the most optimal way to run these experiments in such a short amount of time.
I can add in just from my experience as well that it kind of depends on what you want to get out of iGEM. For example, if people are, I don't know what everyone's level of experience is with, you know, broadly speaking, genetic engineering and DIY biology, but a lot of it depends on what do you want to get out of it. For example, if you're more interested in the ethics side of things, there's a lot to talk about with human practices, and that's a lot of what I do now as a graduate researcher, actually. But there's also the question of you can still do a lot in iGEM and learn a lot without trying to win, as it were. Aaron's gone over a lot of what makes a great, you know, presentation, a great competitive team. I just want to put out it's not all strictly necessary for you to learn a lot about genetic engineering and to get a lot out of the projects. So it's kind of like it's what you want to do.
Yeah, and honestly, you learn the most from those, like from just attempting to do stuff, right? Because most of the Purdue team, when we were starting, we didn't even make bronze most of the time because of how, like, you know, the stuff happens.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about winning. But, you know, honestly, as a judge, in the judge's perspective, I gave brownie points if I noticed the teams were enjoying themselves and like enjoyed the entire process.
And I want to add something. So every team structure is like a little different. I know that at Northwestern, they do like you have to apply in. It's kind of like you're applying into an internship. And for Purdue, we also did that too, but that process was actually done by us students, compared to Northwestern, where the faculty advisors go through and like basically select students. And so every year it's like a slightly different team, like team members. Like some people might apply 2 years in a row, but generally speaking, every year the team is like a new set of people. And it's more kind of like, I think the students still have a little bit of autonomy over what kind of projects they pursue and things like that. But I think the Purdue iGEM approach was a little bit more like DIY. Like we were really the ones figuring it out. Like we would spend months like meeting in the evenings and kind of talking about like what projects we wanted to pursue, like what are the reasons why this is really like we think this is interesting or important to pursue. And then we were kind of like selling our ideas to our faculty advisors and being like, do you think this is like viable / interesting enough for us to like actually go through with and like, you know, move forward with. And I think that with that process comes a lot of skills in like literature searching, because you kind of have to figure it out on your own. It also comes with the ability to kind of like just like parse through like what's maybe viable and what's not. And you will find that if you go that route, you will overestimate what is like achievable in like a really short amount of time, especially when you know you don't necessarily have a PhD yet maybe. And that's fine, that's part of the process. And I think that sort of like kind of DIY way of learning was really valuable, at least for me. And it prepared me for the kind of things you have to be prepared for if you are thinking about even like a graduate degree later on in your career. And I don't think that teams that were kind of like really heavily mentored and just kind of were basically like handed projects and like, here you go, you are pairs of hands for this project, do this, do that. You don't necessarily go through that same thought process. And I think that's really the beauty of iGEM. So that's, I'm very biased, I think. So that's my personal opinion.
No,
I wanted
you can.
to piggyback on what Hannah was saying. So I was treasurer for one of the years, and one thing that I learned in the previous years that was like stood out to me during the ideation process when I was treasurer was the fact that when you're choosing a project, you need to also think about in the back of your head, will you get funding for this project, and how easy is it to get funding, and will you get the sufficient amount of funding? So Purdue is in Indiana, so it's more of like, and Purdue is an agricultural school. So if we came up with a project idea that was based on like somewhat related to agriculture, we were pretty sure that we were going to get a sufficient amount of funding from the Purdue colleges itself to help us. And then also all like a bunch of companies in Indiana are also ag companies. So it'd be really easy to reach out to them and get grants and get funding if we wanted to do something more in like an art-based type of project, which was one of the ideas one year. But we were also thinking, which companies would give us funding, where would we have to go to get that funding, and how feasible would that project be? So like all of these things, if it wasn't like built from a ground up and the students thinking about it, it might have been taken care of already. But since we were doing it ourselves, we really had to think about all these little aspects that you don't really, I guess, learn any other way. So that's really useful.
One of the other questions in chat is iGEM going to be affected as a result of COVID? Yeah, for this year in 2020, it's all virtual. I'm a judge for 2020, and they changed a bunch of the criteria to meet a lot of the medals so that way it's easier for teams to, I guess, qualify for them. And so I believe to like even place, you don't even need to do wet lab research now. And so, I mean, if it's all virtual next year as well, then it'll probably be the same. And then another question is, I guess, what are or were some major hiccups that iGEM teams can have or encounter? There's a lot,
many hiccups can be experienced. Like the biggest one is timing, I think, right? I think everyone that has iGEM experience can all agree that like underestimating how long things take, especially because like things won't work the first time, as it never does in just like research in general. I think that's like the biggest thing, like timeline. Yeah. And then that like lends itself into like all kinds of trouble down the line.
I want to piggyback on that. It doesn't work the first time, or it just maybe it can't work. I saw 3 years of iGEM teams while I was advising, and something that was almost predictable was after month 1, like at least a quarter, maybe half of the potential projects that the group was working on, and we had like 12 people working within the student group. About a quarter to half of them, they would just realize, we can't do this. And there's usually a point at which you either sort of like you have backup plans, or like things you can pivot into, or things that you can kind of other options or other avenues to explore within whatever kind of project you've chosen. And I'd say that's a common hiccup, along with timing.
Yeah, a lot of pivoting.
I have a quick question. How did you get started in actually thinking of problems you wanted to address in like projects?
I think a lot of it is like, it depends on what your take is and how broad you want your problem like scope to be. But I do tend to think that a lot of judges appreciate more like local issues. So rather than like trying to solve like world hunger, which is like a huge scope, right? Instead of that, focusing on something that may be like a little bit closer to home. I think Calgary actually did a pretty good job of like focusing on like a more local issue that had broad impacts, but not necessarily like, something that like affects all these things. I think that sense of kind of like community engagement and like community contribution is really important. So I think that's like a good way to like narrow down a lot of ideas. And just like current events also, just kind of like hot topics. That's like, a thing now. Like I think one of the years there was like a problem with like algae blooms, and that's how we ended up doing like
I think that was one of our best projects.
Yeah. So that like sort of like current events / local issues that you like hear about, I think are good ways to kind of like start brainstorming.
Yeah, and it really helps with public human practices if it's a local issue, because then you can talk to experts, that are around, like within driving distance to you. But I guess now that COVID exists, we can like talk to them virtually. But yeah, usually local issues is just a lot better choice.
So one way that we could theoretically go about this is, say, keeping track of local newspapers, seeing different things that may or may not be showing up in local companies or as local science issues as well, and then maybe go from there.
Yeah, Griffin, you're gonna say something?
I'm actually just going to paste a few links in about order of how seriously you might want to take them. But something that we always kind of look towards, where, believe it or not, government's innovative. And the DARPA is one of those institutes that is always funding very long forward-looking stuff. So you can look at, there's things like advanced plant technologies, detecting radiological nuclear explosive threats, biological control systems, robustness in biological complex settings. Like there's a lot of, if you look at what people are actually funding, like there's a good chance that what people are funding at a high level is what is going to be a hot topic for iGEM, because that's that's the forward-looking stuff in science. And then along a similar avenue, if you go to like Nature, Nature opinions, not the hard science articles, but like the opinion pages, like what did a scientist I don't know, read in a recent sci-fi book and think, yeah, I could do that. That's a good way to kind of get your finger on the pulse of where things are heading and what might be a fun project. Not necessarily an easy or a realistic one, but certainly something that makes for a good narrative within the iGEM project's presentation.
Yes, yeah. Another one is just Googling like local environmental issues. So I think like municipal water waste treatment is probably a big one here in Arizona because we literally live in a desert. So like probably improving like biological systems able to like treat water would probably be a pretty good one, or other related issues like that.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I was also just going to ask about, where you kind of first start with your inspiration, and I noticed you mentioned a lot about communicating with people in our local community to understand their needs. At what point do you feel it's appropriate to start reaching out to those people? Do you feel like you have to already have some kind of ideation in the works, or should you go to them first to see if you can turn that into a project?
I think that a lot of teams tend to do the thinking parts first and then reaching out. And like to an extent, like you want to have like some idea fleshed out, like you want to have like a general idea of what you want to do. But I think that, incorporating stakeholder voice and opinion into your project is like a really key part of human practices. And I think a lot of teams neglect that. So I think the earlier that you can get expert and stakeholder opinions and start that conversation going, the more informed your project will be.
Honestly, I think it's best if you just like contact them and ask them what are the issues within the field. And then that way they can give you like all the issues that they're running into. And then you can like try to think of like, oh, here's where synthetic biology might be able to help. And then like later, maybe you can like propose like, what do you think about this idea? And then get their feedback on that. So like, honestly, yeah, I mean, you want to talk to them as early as possible.
Yeah, I would love to see more teams do that as a judge. Like, it's really exciting when I know that teams have like started talking to people early on and that's like informed their design and changed their design. That's like wonderful to see. And often it doesn't happen. So yeah.
That's fair. You also freaked me out a little when you mentioned like reading books. I just finished Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. And I was like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Like maybe we need to stop. So
you should work on human practices. No, that's good inspiration for understanding. Yeah, good on you. That's because people forget that, and that's how we wound up with the 2017. Yeah, the 2017 I think Minnesota team trying to make a gene drive, which had all sorts of ethical issues. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to explore. Just I'd say for everyone who's interested in iGEM. I don't know what angle everyone's coming in here from of why you're interested. Like, are you interested because it's just cool to do genetic engineering? Is it because like you think that the implications of genetic engineering are neat? Did you see Prometheus and think, yeah, this movie speaks to me? I don't know everyone's coming from that, but there are a lot of aspects to the whole planning project that also, you're all students, like it's going to inform what you want to work on in the future as either scientists or policymakers or whatever you want to be doing. And answering those kinds of questions of, should we be working on this, in addition to like making some of the like fundamental parts, because thankfully biology is hard and it's kind of hard to do something that's like truly damaging despite our best efforts. So for better or for worse, I guess that's my 2 cents on that aspect.
Reassuring, thank you.
Lastly, one of the questions is how much time should we spend on planning versus actually working on the project? Do one of the other panelists want to talk?
So I would say in my experience, in terms of planning versus executing, usually like once there are some teams that kind of adopt the mantra of once the Jamboree ends, like that's when you should already be starting to plan the next project. But like in general, I would feel that planning should really be, for the most part, ironed out, or like you should have a solid frame of what your project is going to be probably before like the big summer research starts. At least that way you can, once you're either starting your internship based off your team, or when your actual team members start doing the research, they already have a framework to go off of and a way to track progress. I know from my experience, I think when I first started iGEM and was an intern, we were kind of doing both at the same time, where we had an idea of what we wanted to do, but I don't think we took the appropriate amount of time to flesh it out and ask the number of people required to get an informed idea, essentially. So there was a lot of back and forth of trying an experiment, realizing it's not working, doing some research or asking some people, and realize like some parts just couldn't work to begin with. So in general, I'd say a lot of the planning should kind of be finished up, or a majority of it should be done probably throughout the school semesters. And usually once you approach the summer, you should already have like a plan of how you want to tackle your research. And then the summer should just be like experiments, feedback, iterate until you have some form of product. And then from there, you can kind of construct your wiki and bring everything together.
Yeah, I think another point to add is that things take time to arrive. Like when you order genes and equipment and like reagents, like they don't just like magically appear like out of thin air. So you have to consider like you have to have all of like at least like an initial list of things you want to order. So then you can order, and then by the time everyone shows up in the summer, it's like all there and you can just like go. Because if you order at the beginning of summer, there'll be at least like a week buffer time where you can't do anything because you don't have the things you need to do anything. That sucks. And that's like constantly a problem for me as a PhD student right now. So like I have like 6 years to do my stuff. So it's just like, you know, thinking about that, it's really important to like have at least the broad strokes, like Sarat said, hammered out before you like all arrive. Yeah.
This is kind of off topic, but piggybacking on this, make sure you update your wikis throughout the process of you guys like doing the project, because a lot of the teams, like the Purdue team, we would do everything within the last few days, and a lot of us didn't have a lot of like HTML experience, so it was kind of a headache. And then a lot of the time we didn't even upload all of our data. And like even like the Harvard team last year I judged, they weren't able to upload all of their data, and they weren't able to qualify for any medals because of that.
It's
like make sure
heartbreaking.
throughout the process, like you're updating it and making changes when needed.
So
Yeah,
pro tip, something that I learned from their experience, because they were the previous summer teams for iGEM at Purdue. So what I learned from them is that, so since I was treasurer and I was working over the summer, I also took on the job of being the wiki manager. And I did have like HTML basic experience. So while I was doing my treasurer work, I could also input all the data on the wiki and keep my summer teammates accountable for the work that they should be giving me, so I could be updating while we go, and also think about the layout of the wiki. And even like, I mean, if you're not good at web design, HTML is like hard in the sense of when you need to format all your data really pretty, you need to make sure it's visible on mobile as well as on desktop, because when the Jamboree goes on, the iGEM judges are going to be looking on their phones mostly what the wiki looks like. So if your wiki is like all over the place on your phone, it's going to be really hard for the judges to read it. So you have to think about these things. So yeah, maybe like having somebody responsible for the wiki like by itself is also really important. So yeah, you have all of those things happening simultaneously, and everybody puts it to the last minute. So if you're trying to work on your wiki the day before the wiki freeze, which is the day it's due, the website doesn't really work. It's super slow. If you're trying to update something, like even like, let's say you missed a word, it will take like maybe 2 minutes for the page to even load. So because like globally teams are working on like the same database, because all the wikis are housed on the same database. So just know that, do it beforehand, and you will save yourself so much time and stress. But it happens regardless, but just make your lives a little bit easier.
Chaos, like chaotic energy. I think also like in general, if you look at your wiki as kind of like almost like a lab notebook, if you ever work in a lab, you should be updating your lab notebook every day, as they say. Most of us, I think, are bad at keeping up, even grad students. I'm calling myself out also. But in general, it's like good practice to get into like keeping record of what you did on a regular basis, because you will surprise yourself with how quickly you forget experimental details. You're like, I can't remember what I did 2 days ago. And then you're screwed if you don't have it written down somewhere at the very least. So it's just a good practice to,
especially like when you're first running your first experiments, it's not going to go well the first time. So you need to like know what exactly you did and know what you should avoid doing it the next time. But yeah, and then also like piggybacking on what we've been talking about for planning, make sure you take advantage of your advisors and us, like the graduate mentors. So I know Griffin's mentioned he's interested, and then I'm also interested in being a graduate mentor. But yeah, make sure you communicate with us and ask us any questions that you have, because honestly, like when I was in iGEM, we didn't ask our mentors as much as we probably should have. We didn't really get good at that until like around the later years.
Yeah, you can save yourselves a lot of tears by just saying, "Hey, is this idea dumb?" And then if we say yes immediately, then that's, several weeks worth of reading.
Yeah.
I just like
in some cases.
I give people my contact and I'm like, hey, let me know if you like want advice, even like over email, just like shoot me a quick question. I'm happy to respond. No one responds. And then, so for me, it's tricky because the Northwestern team is on the main campus and I'm in the medical school campus. I don't even like see the team regularly. So I really only see them like at the Jamboree when I'm judging and they're presenting. And then I see their project and like, there are so many things that I would have told you to not do as soon as I saw your proposal. And I'm just like, you guys should have reached out to me. And I feel like it happens every time. So just please reach out to someone and it will save you so much chaos.
That's the other hiccup. Yeah, I should have mentioned the this won't work, will it?
And then also going back to hiccups. Oh, yeah, Reg.
Sorry, quick thing. Yeah, also from like a monetary perspective, getting graduate mentor advice can really save your team money. Like literally, I think like a week ago, the Purdue iGEM team reached out to me for a protocol they wanted to do. And like after looking through it, like literally in 2 minutes, I was like, this is going to cost you hundreds of dollars to do it. You should pursue an alternative method. So, it's amazing what like a 20 or 30 minute or like a 5-minute conversation or, a couple email exchanges can do to save your budget and keep you afloat while you're trying to get all your work done.
And safety.
Yeah. Oh yeah, safety. That's a big one too.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, going into like also hiccups, also like design of our genetic constructs. Like it's normal to make mistakes. Like even as graduate students, we make mistakes all the time. So like if you guys have a finalized like design, send it over to us and your advisors to like look through it to make sure that like, to make sure that there's a promoter and an RBS, because like, oh no, we have a promoter but no RBS, so our ribosome isn't even gonna like transcribe like the RNA into like the DNA into RNA, so it's like not gonna work. yeah, so like make sure you take advantage of your graduate mentors and advisors.
The sooner you speak to them, the less problems you will have. Because it's so hard if you're like 2 months already in and you ask them questions and they're like, this won't work. So then you just wasted so much time and money and like just, yeah, everything, all your resources. So ask early and then keep that constant communication. Like have like weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, whatever. Set up a schedule and make sure you're communicating. They understand if you won't get stuff done and that you might not meet a deliverable, but that's so much better than you waiting those like extra couple weeks or days that you might have made a mistake or might have overlooked something, because I mean, we're all learning. So, and they have a little bit more experience than you do. So just, yeah, hindsight is 2020. So yeah, take that and just always keep that open line of communication.
And like, you got to keep yourself accountable anyways, because like no one, like you're doing this for yourself, right? So like don't worry so much about like specific, like you want to worry about like the project deadlines for like iGEM. Like you don't want to miss like registration deadlines, like, or deadlines to submit your abstract, etc. Like those are hard deadlines, but everything else is internal. So it's kind of like, as long as you're like working hard, it's okay.
I think Joel also asked, do you guys have trouble finding labs or mentors to host a project? I think that I haven't talked to Dr. Varman and Dr. Plaisir, but we have space here. Before COVID, we were planning on having the iGEM team work in our lab because we have a lot of space. So I think for like any of the projects, you guys would be working in our lab. But if you guys wanted to work on like a mammalian cell project, which is a lot more difficult, so I wouldn't recommend it. You would have to find another PI that could let you borrow their space, like Dr. Plaisir's.
I was just about to ask if like you usually end up spread out amongst a bunch of different labs, or if you consolidate under one professor usually.
We had one main advisor. So I think for you guys it would be Dr. Varman and Dr. Plaisir. So they would be giving you your feedback, and then we had like auxiliary advisors based on our project. So one year we were working on like lignocellulosic biomass degradation, and we were using the enzymes from termites, or the gut cells from termites, and we actually got the genes from one of the PIs at Purdue. So we invited him to our weekly meetings, and he would show up like every so often, or I think every week actually, and like he would give us input on our project.
Okay, well, thank you. I actually have to go to another team meeting, but I wanted to thank you all for your time. This has been really helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us.
I have a question that's, I think, maybe a bit too specific, but I'll toss it out there anyways, because why not? When you're coming up with different ideas and you're trying to figure out what the heck even is the idea that I've come up with, how do I put terms on it? How do I search for things that are similar to it? What are some of the processes you can use for that?
I would say just go into a Google hole. You just Google like the first term, and you just keep following that lead until you like realize you can also search on Google Scholar for like more specific information.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, if I'm like trying to figure out like what the heck something is, I just go to PubMed. But I'm in like biomedical research, so like that, like I stay within that realm. But yeah, just Googling the shit out of it, basically.
Oh yeah.
Can I curse on this? I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah, iGEM, what Griffin links is also really helpful because they have like a lot of introductory information about certain things. YouTube is also really great. There's like a lot of DIYbio like presentations and like lectures there that people put up. And then also another great source is just review articles. So just like reading review articles because they just have like a bunch of information that can really help you like learn about certain things like metabolic engineering or protein engineering.
This was great. Thank you guys. I don't know. I know we're a little bit late on when the meeting was supposed to run, but this was awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming and answering all these great questions. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Sorry, David, do you have one more thing you wanna?
Yeah, we can take one more question, I guess.
Oh no, I need to ask Maggie a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was a individual Zoom message.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah, Zoom chat. Okay. Yeah, so unless there's any like final closing statements or anything.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have like specific questions. I am like a straight up biologist, so if you're interested in like stem cell bio, like that related sort of stuff, I can help answer those sort of specific questions too. I think my contact was in the slide. I can't remember. If not, you can ask Aaron for my email address. He has my contact info, so yep.
We'll definitely be doing that.
You have treasurer related questions. You have like 3 treasurers right here on this panel. So we got you on the funding part, which will make life so much easier because once you get the science down, you get the funding down, everything should work kind of according to plan.
I'm same time zone and all that. I'm here in Tempe in biodesign A, so I'm pretty accessible, and I work in nanotechnology and like RNA logic devices, like genetic circuits. So pretty sim bio focused as well.
Yeah, Griffin's work was a pretty hot topic last year. Like every single team and their mothers were like working on very similar stuff.
The bleeding edge. And also, if anyone's interested in more the human practice side of things, I guess I'll just plug what I work on with our group here of graduate and undergraduate students.
Oh yeah, they would be a really good like resource to utilize.
Yeah, we're Arizona Science Policy Network, and we do a lot of stuff on education on how to get involved in science policy, what it actually looks like, how to write things like op-eds and memos, and really the broader impacts of science and technology. So if anyone's interested, just feel free to shoot me an email or go to our website, learn a little bit more. We're kind of doing some renovations, so if it's not especially informative, might be. But yeah, hopefully that's of interest to y'all.
Yeah, feel free to also contact us about like information, like any type of question that's not even just like iGEM, but like graduate school as well, research wise, because I'm sure we'd all be happy to help.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. I'll definitely make sure to put your emails in the next newsletter we put out. Okay, I'll stop the recording now.